live.
I
Okay.
think we did it. Hallelujah.
Yes. Good morning to everybody and umata seitashimashita. We are 5 minutes late because, by habit, I scheduled this morning session for 8:20 and not 8 o'clock, and we had to wait for 5 minutes so that LinkedIn would allow us to start. Thank you very much for waiting, for your patience. Today, we are very happy to have Myles Delfin with us, the founder of the Bike Scouts project. So, this is Myles' third time with us, and we are very grateful, Myles, for your time. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the podcast. With Tim and me, between the three of us, today we're going to talk about some lessons learned during disaster relief, and I believe that we'll also diverge probably on the way from the topic and talk about other things. But please bear with us and stay with us, enjoy the conversation. Myles, I'm sure that our listeners already know you, but just in case, could you please introduce yourself shortly and briefly, and then we can dive into the theme.
Sure thing, absolutely. First of all, thank you again, Maya and Tim, for having me. Always happy and very proud to be a part of your podcast. This is, honestly, this is now my favorite podcast ever, because I'm able to really share the work of the Bike Scouts. So again, I'm Miles. I'm the founder of the Bike Scouts project. We're based here in the Philippines, and we've been in existence since 2013. So we just celebrated our 10th year. The bike scout started off on the day that Typhoon Yolanda, actually. Typhoon Yolanda made landfall in the Philippines 10 years ago. So we started by working as volunteer bicycle messengers for disaster response. So what that means is that we use our bicycles to provide an alternative means of access to communication, information, and essential supplies for people and places that are isolated by disasters. But in the past 10 years, a lot of other people, at least here in the Philippines, started to join up. And not everyone was actually into disaster response specifically. A lot of people just wanted to join so that they can be part of the community to help in whatever way that they can. And we found out that that's actually the strongest foundation for resilience anywhere. And so the bike sales has become sort of like a platform, sort of like a community, even for resilience and for disaster preparedness and response here in the Philippines. And like in the past 2 years, we've been able to launch our own mobile app. We're not able to scale it yet, but because we are unfunded, we don't have any investors or sponsors, so we're doing this out of pocket, everything. Yeah, but for the past 10 years, we've been able to respond as a community to over 200 disaster events as of today. So thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Yes. And recently, just this year here in Japan, started with a strong earthquake. And Tim and I, we have often talked about how the Bike Scouts experiences can be applied to such cases in Japan. And of course, and unfortunately, this year started with the Noto earthquake, and there have been quite a lot of issues there, just like everywhere, of course, and it happens here every time we get a natural disaster. But I was wondering, maybe we can talk about how, your first, or what is the most important thing actually when we try to respond in immediately after a disaster, a natural disaster of that scale, or even if of a smaller scale. So maybe you can give us some insights there from your experience so far.
Sure thing. So for clarity and for context, the approach of the Bike Scouts is community based. So we're not like other organizations where we have like actual professionals. Even though, like for example, myself, I've been doing wilderness rescue for as long as I can remember, and a lot of the members of our core team also have the same experience, and they also come from a mountain bike racing background, and also adventure racing background. So I mentioned these things just to give, because a lot of people ask me all the time, for example, that how can ordinary people participate in disaster response? And there are two parts to that, to the answer for that. Number one is that we do have the experience, we do have the training, but number two is that we focus on community. community-based response. And so, how people can participate, how people in a community can participate to provide help and assistance during disasters to their own family, to their own neighbors, to their own immediate community. So that's what the basically what the Bike Scouts does. And then, sorry, Maya, you have to remind me about the question again. I went too far afield there.
Oh, no, no, you didn't go too far.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question is, what is the most important thing? Well, in the immediate response, and I think that you answered
Yeah.
basically that is the community, right?
Yes.
And yeah, and I guess they know what to do. I mean, right? And do you train people in various communities to help them do it? Do you try to lay down some guidelines for them?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, Tim. And the answer to that is actually, again, very simple. Resilience, the same as our sort of like our approach to disaster response, begins long before a disaster happens, or long before people realize that they need to participate in local resilience. And so, what we do is because we're focused on cycling, so we use cycling a lot to get people together. So when we say cycling, it's not just cycling for sports. It's not even cycling for adventure or travel. It's just cycling. A lot of times, a lot of people who join the bikes out, they don't ride bikes. A lot of people are only starting to use bicycles for mobility to get to work, to get to the park, to the coffee shops, so on and so forth. And so we start there because as I mentioned earlier, we start with a sense of community, and the way that we sort of like experience building our community here in the Philippines is that it has to start with shared value, and we can't just at least again in the context of the Philippines, we can't just go out and tell people that, oh, you need to participate in this because it will save lives, because so on and so forth. Even climate change, the reality is that people a lot of times are so busy, and rightly so, with their personal lives, because of course we take care of our families, take care of jobs. We have a million things on our minds every day, and without anyone adding more to the things that we have to think about. But if we provide value in the sense that, for example, okay, join us this weekend. We're going to have coffee, not even ride bicycles. Some of us are going to ride our bicycles, going to the spot, to the venue, and then we'll all just meet each other there, and then we'll tell stories. We'll trade, I don't know, homemade cookies, home baked cookies, and stuff like that. It starts there. So a lot of times people misunderstand because people a lot of times when I present bike scouts, for example, a lot of people expect that I would be presenting something technical. But I always tell people that we don't start off that way. We just start with the very foundation, with the very core need of building a community, which is again shared value. So that's how we start.
That's I feel like your approach is it's community. That's the word you're using, but it's also, just relationship oriented, right? You're like, start with the relationship building. It's a process orientation, right? That
Yes.
evolves from there,
Yes.
right? And I think in general that's a really good approach in Japan as well. Um, because of those community based
Yes.
initiatives. And as I showed that article I shared, it was the people in Mizuhama. They had been training their entire lives for this tsunami, on a very disciplined basis. And they all followed the protocol, but they were all elderly too. You're not talking young people, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll bet they didn't even have cell phones, most of them. And yet those, what, low tech, my friend used to call it mind technologies, and which really isn't low tech because the mind is so complex, but he called it mind technologies. And it was always build from that,
Yes.
build from your mind technologies. So I just, everything you say resonates because everything I've studied about how a lot of communities responded to, 311, it's just, it seems very compatible and that it fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm going to share a a secret that I shared before, actually, about the Bike Scouts. So it has to
Okay.
do with how I came up with the idea for the Bike Scouts. And a part of the Bike Scout story, a part of the inspiration for the Bike Scouts is actually the Japanese culture for resilience. So one particular story that I always share, because this is actually something that I read like a really long time ago, before I even thought of like getting involved in resilience and community-based disaster response and preparedness. And it was about uh, a tsunami event in Japan. I forgot the name of the place, but one of the and the story changes, so I'm not very sure which one is the actual thing. One story says that the man, by the way, his name is Gorio, I think. And one version of the story says he's a teacher. Another version says that he's the owner of a soy sauce factory. But what happened was that there was a tsunami. This happened in the evening or late at night. I'm not sure. Um, so the way that he organized the community so that everyone would be saved is that he asked his neighbors to help set fire to rice leaves so that everyone would find a way to hide towards high ground. So that's a very simple approach, but very, very effective. And I think the community that you mentioned, Tim, I think they got it right, because from our experience over the past 10 years here in the Philippines, number one, the first thing that gets destroyed during a disaster is technology. Sad as it sounds, but no
No, yeah.
technology actually survives severe disaster. Like for example, a lot of times we watch and rewatch footage of the different tsunamis there in Japan, and we can see how powerful nature can be, and it just completely wipes off everything in its path, and that we have the same experience, even just with wind, even just with severe flooding from typhoons here in the Philippines. It's the same thing. Even the most protected equipment, for example, that the weather agency here in the Philippines has, we've seen how it was ripped apart as if it was made of paper. And so whenever we do disaster preparedness and response, we always start with the premise that there will be no technology that survives except the most resilient, and that includes bicycles. And that's why one of the reasons why we actually focus on bicycles, because bicycles provide mobility, and mobility provides the foundation for local resilience.
Yeah. It's it's interesting because I lived in suburbia Chicago, and as a kid I lived in Chicago. A lot of disasters did not happen. It was rare. It was an occasional tornado, and but even that, it was just very, very rare, right? So I never had that survival mentality because a disaster can come any moment. I never had that mindset. But then I moved to Hawaii, the Big
Mm.
Island, and you are in the most remote landmass in the world. You're remote, right? And how would I say it? So when a disaster happens, so for example, we had it was a hurricane. It was almost a hurricane, tropical storm, but it was really powerful. All our roads were blocked.
Yep.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
every
Mhm.
road, right? And everybody who lives there knows that no one's going to come help them. They just know it. They're not mad about it. They just know it, and so they're ready, right? And it's the first time I heard the local expression in Hawaii. They called it chemo construction. Chemo is like a common name, like John, right? Chemo construction. I'm like, chemo, what is that? And they're like, everyone in this neighborhood has a chainsaw. They're going to drive down the street. When they see a thing down, they're going to cut it into pieces and clear the road. And by the end of the day, all the roads are going to be. And sure enough, by the end of the day, all the roads were clear. And it was
Mm.
the time I was exposed to this level of we got to be self sufficient. And then the community just came together. It was like magic, but it's in the culture. You're on an island. You're remote. Stuff happens. Lava flows. All of this stuff happens, right? So that really, and so now I'm looking at Hawaii mentality, the Philippine mentality, and the Japanese mentality, which I was familiar with, and I'm seeing a lot of overlap. And they're all islands, by the way, island culture, right?
Yes.
Anyway, just an observation.
Yeah. No, no. Actually, that's a very good example, and particularly the example of Hawaii, the Philippines, and Japan being archipelagic, being islands at least. Um, it provides a unique problem. One thing that I think the same problem that you guys have there, probably in Japan and in Hawaii, is that it's not that easy to transport equipment and supplies from one island to another. It
Mhm.
usually sounds easy, like in the planning stages, whenever, and I get this a lot. Like for example, I get to attend a lot of like disaster planning meetings and conferences and things like that here in the Philippines. And there's always this 200 slide deck where everything is laid down and everything seems fine and great and prepared on paper, or at least on digital paper. But from our experience in the past 10 years, um, all of these plans, well laid plans, goes out the window the moment that a Category 5 typhoon happens, for example, or an earthquake or severe flooding. Because uh, disasters, natural, well, UN says that there's no such thing as a natural disaster, but yeah, disasters by their nature is a very fast evolving event. So we're planning for one to maybe 10 things, but the thing that will happen on at the moment that the disaster happens could be completely different from what we planned for, and we've seen this a lot of times, and not just for disaster events, but even for emergency events. So every event that happens is unique, and a lot of times the problem that people face is that the help that they need is very far away from where the help is needed, and the only way to actually address that problem is for to have like local preparedness, to have local capability and knowledge and skills on the ground. And when I say local, because here in the Philippines, whenever people talk about local, what they actually mean is government, or even like big organizations that have local presence. So this is not the same. And I think some even international organizations starting to realize this, and starting to advocate for this, because it's really not the same. For example, there's a place here in the Philippines, a very remote place called Sulangan. So it's actually an island. It's a fishing village, and unfortunately, majority of the typhoons that come from the Pacific Ocean either skirt this area or make landfall directly on this island. So the people there have gotten very used to very powerful typhoons, and so what they have there is very unique because they can read the weather, they can read the waves, and they know how to respond. They know how to help each other before, during, and after disasters. The same story on another island here in the Philippines, in the northernmost tip of Luzon Island, which is the biggest island in the Philippines, where the capital city of Manila is located as well. So Batanes Island, it's called, is very unique because it's actually closer to Taiwan than it is to the main island of Luzon here in the Philippines. So it's very remote. And again, this is another one of those places where typhoons from the Pacific usually impact directly. This is one of those islands where it's a very small island, but Category 5 typhoons, Category 4s usually like directly pass overhead this island. So the people in Batanes, they've gotten so used to this fact of life for them that it's natural for them. They probably don't even have a term for it, but it's very natural for them to have like a community-based response to the threat of disaster, to risk, and even to the impact of disasters. One thing that they usually do, and I know this because it's the local bike scouts in Batanes that lead this effort. They, before a storm, for example, arrives, they go around with their hammers, with their saw, and their other construction supplies, that whatever that they have. They go around their neighbors' homes and they help each other strengthen the houses that need sort of like better protection from wind and from water. And so they do this completely for free. Nobody asked them to do this, but this is a natural reaction of the community. And I know that in Japan you have the same culture, like looking after each other in a community, doing everything from a community context. And that's why I think, at least from my perspective, sitting here in the Philippines right now and reading about Japan all the time, I know that there's a really good chance that the bike scouts can do well in Japan because of the very strong culture of resilience and very strong sense of community that the Japanese have.
Yeah,
Oh,
I feel like Japan has a lot of strengths. Like I look at some of their responses, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they pull together, they do stuff right. Um, and I see it with the Philippines too. And I have a friend who went back. What was the first typhoon where that kind of got in this? 10 years.
Typhoon Yolanda.
Yolanda.
Yolanda. Yeah.
I think he was kind of like in the media space, and I think he went there, but he was also volunteering. You know, and so he was. I don't know if he was a first responder, but he went there pretty quickly, right? And he was living in Japan at the time, and he had he had just seen the disaster in Japan, right? And he was making a comparison. I'm not saying it's fair or not fair. I'm just saying this is what he told me, right? He said the Filipinos were different because people right there started rebuilding. Like it was a grassroots level, and he goes, they were just really resourceful. He said in Japan, a lot of the regular people were almost like hesitant because like maybe they haven't been trained or they didn't know exactly what to do, or maybe they needed permission to do it. You know, not that they don't want to do it, but for whatever reason, he said there were a lot of people who were kind of paralyzed, like they didn't know what to do. Right.
Well,
And of course, as you
yeah.
always point out, the government didn't sufficiently respond to their needs either. Okay. Anyway, just a comment. I don't know if that's controversial or not. I'm not. I again, I love Japan. I think Japan did some awesome stuff. So I'm not.
Yes.
I don't think Timothy can hear me, but
Tim?
I can hear you.
Yes.
sorry. Okay.
He
Yeah.
can
So
hear you.
yeah, I mean that's actually sort of I was dying to ask Miles. Hi, Miles. Thank you so much for joining
Hello.
us. I couldn't just yeah, you know, I was so looking forward to speaking to you again. You know the point about Japanese needing some permission because that was actually my question because you know when we hear because my friends and I in the states you know first thing you know first reaction is oh my god we need to help so we get together and because we're so remote in the states you know naturally we only think about sending some money but then we're looking to where and so we're just you know the searching and then a lot of people suggested that we send the money to the municipal you know the official sites but all the sites are saying please don't come you're going to be in our way if you are not trained professionals please just you know maybe send some money that would be the best thing to do so I was thinking you know those like some like organization like a bike scout is there takes a lot of training so you have to have the training to begin with to be able to sort of help when the help is needed I'm
Yes.
hoping
Good question. Thank you for that. Thank you.
That's actually a very good question, and something that I think is very important for me to highlight as well. So there are two components to the bike sales. One is the community component, and the second one is the response component. The first one is the community. So for the community, it involves everyone. Anyone who signs up to be a part of the bike sales community can participate in the community component, in the community response. So what this usually involves is like finding supplies, packing those supplies, and finding ways to transport them. You know, the usual things, or maybe even promoting the response that we're doing on social media, so we can get more support. So and a lot of other things. And this is actually at the very heart of what the Bike Scouts does, because Bike Scouts again is a network of support. So for us to have a network of support, we really need as many people to be a part of the community as possible, because every little thing that anyone can contribute actually adds up to a lot of good in the end. So the second part to what the Bike House does is the response component. So for the response component, this is the more technical aspect of the response, and we limit the technical component to just a few who, number one, have actual experience doing this, and then number two, who are willing to participate in regular training. So when I say regular training, I don't mean that we just do a CPR training once a year or twice a year. You know, it has to be like on a weekly basis. at very least, because when we do technical response, it requires very specific skills, and it has to be almost like muscle memory for us to be able to do these things. So it's not for everyone. And when I say it's not for everyone, it also involves sort of like the psychological, the mental, even the spiritual aspect of disaster response. Because whenever someone goes into ground zero or disaster areas, there are a lot of things there that can sort of like change a person, and it's not really a fair thing to do to send someone who is not sort of like not a fit, who's not really prepared to handle the stress, sort of like the trauma of having to see all of these things. So that's one of the reasons why we really need to limit. So again, two things: community aspect and the disaster response aspect. And I want to touch on very quickly with what Tim said, actually, about the Japanese needing permission. And I could be wrong, of course, because I'm sitting thousands of kilometers away here in the Philippines, and I'm just that type of person who loves reading. So I read a lot and consume a lot of content about Japan. And one thing I remember is that it's not so much that the Japanese need permission, but it actually, for me at least, it stems from something that's actually good. Everything that the Japanese does seems to be very community based. Like, for example, whenever the Japanese or even people who live in Japan probably would do whenever they step on a train, they won't. They're going to do their best not to make like a lot of noises, like not even speak on the phone, because they don't want to disturb sort of like the peace, the people who are probably tired coming from work and taking the train going home. And so it's from that context that I view the problem of, not really a problem, but the situation where the Japanese seems to be needing permission. I think the Japanese don't want to add to the problem. And so whenever something happens, they're going to, I think their default mindset is that there is someone who is a professional who will come, who will do the job.
Bingo,
Yeah.
bingo. And
Yep.
Yuka mentioned that. That's where the light bulb went on. Like there, that's where, if there is a hesitation, that's where it is like, should I leave it to the professionals?
Yep.
But I also think some of that is, there's maybe some people misunderstand your approach, which is the local people right there in the thick of it. And as you said off before we started, you start with your neighbors and then you work your way out from there.
Yep.
So you don't have to be a professional to help your family and to help your neighbors. And no matter what you do, don't try to do something you can't do, but do what you can. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you?
Yes, exactly. I mean, for example, if anywhere in the world, if a disaster happens, and if we know that we have a neighbor, for example, who has a newborn child in their household, one of the things that we would probably think about is, do they have enough like water or food for that baby? Maybe I'll just walk like a few meters so I can check up on them. So it's like a very simple act, but that basically forms the basis of what we were trying to do with the bike scouts, because it's the most direct, that's the most honest way of like helping, is to start with the things that are within your reach. And people might say that, but that's too small. We need sort of like a really big response to these disasters, because disasters are often like a very large scale, at a very large scale. But the thing is that if there are enough of us in a community that's affected by disasters that are trying to do small things to help the people around us, that actually equates to like a very large scale response. It's just not so obvious as sending
Right.
trucks and helicopters and stuff like that. But imagine if there are like 1,000 people in one village or one town who are trying to help just even one person in their own community. That's actually 2,000 people that have already received help. Small things, but if we do it like at scale, small things becomes like a really big amount of good, I think.
And it brings us back to building community. And this is just in my mind. I'm not in the cycling I don't do it here. I wish I could. I live on a mountain, so it's not really practical, but I really wish, and maybe there's people in our audience who can help out, just on on a socializing, community building scale, just introduce you to maybe some fellow cyclists here, and maybe approach Japan with love in your heart and say, hey, let's just build community first. I
I
want to
would
get to
love
know
that.
cultural exchange. To me, that's how that's where my mind goes. And again, I don't have contacts. I know a few people. James, right? James Scott Brew. He's a
Yeah.
cyclist and a good guy as well. But so if anybody in the audience is in that world, we need to hook Myles up with somebody who could just be his buddy and they could do some cultural exchange.
Well, one thing that we've been doing here in the Philippines that has proven to be very effective is that we ride our bicycles very long distances to to visit villages, towns, and cities. And usually, when we arrive at one place, we don't even have to explain what we're doing, and we don't even have to invite people to listen to us because they're so curious as to why did you ride like 1,000 kilometers to get here when you could have taken the plane or the bus or something. And what that does is that it sparks the conversation, and it gives us a chance to talk about bicycles, the role of bicycles as resilient mobility, and more importantly, the capacity, the capability of bicycles to travel very long distances and to do so much good, if we know how, if we actually sort of like sit down and really think about how we can make use of such a resilient mobility, such a simple machine that's very easy to use, very easy to maintain, and very easy to learn. Actually.
Right.
Yes. And
It's
oh yeah,
sorry, Maya.
Yuka, go ahead. Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
sorry. No, because this just to think about like a bicycle to Japanese, and then like a maybe Timothy maybe can chime in, but maybe I think bicycle as a sport is much more popular in Europe and even in the States, right? And in Japan, and then also like you said, the Timothy, you live in a mountain area, and Japan is like a very mountainous. So like, so maybe bicycle. People may not think about riding a bike to help someone unless they were introduced to the idea initially.
Right.
I
Yes.
hope it makes sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yuka,
exactly.
yes, I agree with you. But also, I think that especially after March 11, here in Japan, after the big earthquake in northeastern Japan, so in Tokyo, 14 million people walked, and several million stayed, in their offices that night because all the public transportation was stopped. But then the funny thing is that on that night, just within 1 hour, all the bicycle shops they sold out their inventories, which means that those people they were just trying to go home, right? They because they couldn't use the public transportation system, but that was the natural thing to do for them. And
Well,
I
it
think,
helped that there were no mountains in Tokyo.
uh, oh, there are no mountains, Tim, but there are quite a lot of hills here.
Yeah, I know.
And you're not aware of that, but when you start walking, and then you realize that there are really a lot of slopes. But what I want to say is that I think that you're right. That people, the natural thing for them to do was to reach out and to buy a bicycle on the way home. So they just need to be introduced to the idea of helping, of how
Yeah.
bicycle can help actually help them help others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, if I might add,
Yes.
the concept of using a bicycle help uh, to help yourself or to help others is actually already embedded in Japanese culture. It's just that not all of us are able to see it because maybe we're not sort of like consuming the kind of media where this sort of like makes an appearance. But if you notice, for example, in the animation movie My Neighbor Totoro, for example, when the lead character, the little girl, wanted to visit her mother in hospital, she used a bicycle,
Mhm.
and she lived in a very isolated area, and the hospital was a good distance away, apparently, based on the story, and um, she was able to get there, and of course this is animation, this is just fiction and everything, but I know for a fact that in real life it actually happens. And yes, there might be mountains, there might even be like deserts or long stretches of highway between where we are and where we need to be able to do some good. But we always think about this in terms of like the youth, for example, the younger generation, because at least here in the Philippines, and I know for sure that around the world it's the same thing. If you ask, for example, a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 20-year-old kid, well, 20-year-old, they probably won't agree that they're kids, but yeah, but the younger people, and these guys, they can run, they can bike, they can swim long distances, probably even for days without stopping, because they have so much energy. And a lot of times, the one thing that I notice is that the younger generation, and I'm very happy about this, is that they're actually very actively looking for ways to make a difference in their own lives and in the world. But a lot of times, all of us are on social media, and the only things that we ever see are the things that are posted on social media, and most of the time by influencers. So a lot of the things that the influencers post are, of course, very well intentioned, but some of them, or most of them, actually are just things that they imagine. So it's not really based on something that's actually happening in the real world. Number one, and number two, probably it's not really designed to be solving real problems in the real world. But there are a lot of things like the bike scouts concept, for example, that is rooted in a real problem in the real world, and the development of which is also rooted on actual experience. And from our actual experience, responding to disasters and even everyday challenges here in the Philippines, a lot of the younger generation are really willing to do a lot of stuff, and they can ride over anything, over long distances, even, just so that they can get to that place where they can make a difference for themselves and for others.
Yeah, with the aging population here, though, I see the elderly doing it. But Japan's kind of one response is e-bikes, and
Yes.
it allows you to go up these hills much more easily. And so I'm seeing a lot of people my age doing it.
Oh
So
yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
You're not that old, Tim.
I mean, no, but it's still when I was a kid and I thought 65-year-old man, I thought of a guy with a cane.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
Generations have changed. I don't feel like 65. I feel like very immature. As I've written before.
The same.
In my head, I'm like 20 years old. My body is not, unfortunately.
I
Well,
feel the
we don't know
same.
that, Tim. Okay, so just let me say that Hiroko-san is with us in Clubhouse. Hiroko-san, good
Welcome,
morning.
Hiroko-san.
Hello.
Morning, everyone. Hello. This is my first time to meet you. So how do you do? And I, I just want to share my experience with the Hanshin Awaji earthquake. I think it's
Yes,
almost
please do.
29 years ago. And
Yeah.
it's just the company. I was not with the company yet, but I learned from the history that we are based in Osaka, and I felt the earthquake greatly, but fortunately, we only had minor damage. It's just a kind of a flower vase fell off from the shelves. That's all. So, but we have our branch offices nationwide. So what we did was that I heard from the company history is that we are in the food industry. So we have a test kitchen in our office. So we made a lot of rice ball and delivered to the bicycle,
Oh, nice.
and from the Osaka to Kobe,
Right.
in my original office in Kobe. So that's what we did. So that I definitely agree with that the bicycle can help a lot of people in their effort to support and help the people affected.
Yeah.
And we have a regional office has a huge parking space, so we deliver the food, and they just had what do you call it in English? I don't know, takidashi. We offered them the hot soup and the rice bowl and other food. So that was the bicycle was the only way that we can reach to that our regional office in Kobe. But at that time, I don't know if that e-bike was so popular. But yeah, read that the e-bike is popular and among the younger um, mothers.
Oh,
They have
yes.
to
Oh
pick
yeah,
up
yeah,
their
yeah.
children. So I think it's definitely that the answers to that kind of disaster support or help. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank
Wow.
you,
Thank you.
Thank
Miles.
you.
I think you have to make Hiroko an honorary bike scout.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if Hiroko-san
You did
would
it.
like to be a bike scout, I would really love to collaborate and then get something started in Japan right away.
Today,
I think her example is like the perfect example. That's because that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
And if I can add something to the problem of like riding long distances, actually you don't have to do that. A lot of times, for example, if you have something that you need to deliver, you can just deliver it to the end of your street, and then if there are enough bike stalls in your area, you can hand over whatever it is that you need to deliver to someone else who will ride another short distance, so on and so forth, until it gets to where it
Platform.
needs to go.
Yeah.
Even technology uses this approach actually.
Uh,
Many years ago, there was this technology where data would be transmitted short distances over like nearby devices until it gets to where it needs to go. It's exactly the same,
yeah.
except that this is mind technology, as Tim so perfectly puts it.
Yes. I think that Yuka also wanted to add something.
Yeah.
Yuka.
oh, sorry, thank you. Today we happened to talk about it. Today was actually the anniversary of that, the Hanshin earthquake, right? I think it's lots of people woke up early to pray for the victims. I think it's like it happened like very early in the morning. So I
Yeah.
cannot believe it's 29 years ago, but
I
yes,
can't
that's
either.
and
I can't either. That
Yeah,
seems.
it was like early in the morning, 5 something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why everybody woke up early for the victim. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I was not aware actually that we would have this podcast exactly on the
Yeah.
anniversary of the
Yeah.
Hanshin
Wasn't
earthquake.
planned.
It's a perfect way to commemorate it, I think.
Yeah.
It is. Yes, it is indeed. Yes. Thank you very much for sharing that, Yuka. Yes. And Miles, I also because I read the article where you shared the 10 lessons
I thank
from
you. I was about to say that. Thank you.
yes from disaster relief activities during the 10 years you have been running or leading the bike scouts, and some of the things there, some of those lessons they were so profound, and I think that they work. We actually have to remember them in times of disaster, but also in times of non-disaster,
Especially.
events, whatever. Yes, because one of the things that got very well, actually, I was impressed with, or I thought, yes, this is what we always have to remember, is that people like to help themselves, and we have to treat them with dignity and respect, because that is the way. When you treat the people in the affected areas with dignity and respect, you actually help them much more than doing other things.
Yeah.
And
It's
yes.
very powerful. I hate to call it a coping mechanism, but
Mhm.
when you're under distress and then you go help people, you actually feel better, like because you feel like you have some control, right? And I felt that when a lava flow was headed to my house, everybody was doing it, and so I saw that. Go ahead, Miles. I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yeah. Well, actually, dignity is a very big thing for us because, again, we really want to bring back or actually inject the human component to disaster preparedness and response and even resilience in general. Because a lot of times, and I'm not saying that the people who plan things this way are sort of like bad people or wrong necessarily, but maybe it's because a lot of the like agencies, organizations, or even governments, they have this need to be efficient, at least in the way that they perceive efficiency. So a lot of times, disaster preparedness, response, and resilience becomes a practice, an exercise in administration, instead of like thinking of it in terms of like this is a mother, father, someone's uncle, someone's child who is suffering, and they have feelings. They're human beings, and so we need to like approach this from that perspective, that we need to stop and consider how they feel, because people are we are all human beings, are very emotional, right? We
Yes.
like to think of ourselves as rational. We like to think of ourselves as very intellectual, but if we take a look back at our own lives, a lot of big decisions that we've made have actually been driven by emotion, and it's not a bad thing. It's just because we're very, very emotional. And this is one of the reasons why, at least in my generation, like Hallmark cards were very, very popular, because it's just a piece of paper, but when you get something like that, and then someone writes a note on one of the pages of that card, you feel like, okay, this person really remembered me. So a lot of the things that we do in our lives are very emotional, and that involves the sense of dignity. uh, we probably just don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. But people who are impacted by disasters, um, if they get the feeling that they are able to sustain or maintain their dignity, it provides them a way to, and it's not just a coping mechanism, I think, but it's sort of like really the engine behind hope and resilience. Because again, resilience is very easy to think about in terms of like technical terms, like for example, are they able to eat, are they able to find the things that they need? Yes, that's part of resilience, but all of that actually stems from our ability to have hope, to sustain our optimism. And I think even in our daily lives, even in when we sit in our offices, for example, when we're at work, we need some level of optimism for what we're doing, so that we can wake up tomorrow and then do the exact same thing again. So a lot of times, even if it's just preparing like a lunchbox for your kid before they go off to school, and you have to do this every day for a very long time, we need a certain sense of optimism. And that's why we're very proud, for example, when our kids do very well in school, do very well in an exam, or maybe they bring home like a really nice artwork that they did well at school. And that provides us with the optimism that we need to understand that whatever it is, whatever little thing it is that we're doing on a daily basis is important. And when we approach disaster response and resilience that way, from the making like dignity, the preservation of dignity, step one, we're actually helping preserve hope and optimism for people.
Thank
Yes,
you.
indeed.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for
It
that.
makes me feel hopeful.
Yeah, our brains are wired in that way, and maybe that's. I mean, we always look for the ikigai. I think that everybody does, consciously or unconsciously. We always look for that, but we often forget that that sense of hope is probably in the very base of of the search of ikigai, or in basically in the base of ikigai of everybody. So because if we don't have hope, we don't wake up, we don't leave the bed in the morning, right?
That's
So
true.
And we I think we aspire for and crave connection. And we're just wired that way. We can't help it,
That's
and
true. And
so
this is actually one of the reasons why I really, really like, one of the biggest plans in my life right now is to visit Japan. Not so much to be a tourist, but actually to immerse myself in the, like, how does the Japanese sort of like practice their sense of community, their sense of resilience on a daily basis. Even just the simple thing of like, why are Japanese school kids able to walk or ride their bicycles to school and their parents don't worry? Simple things like that probably you guys take for granted, especially the Japanese themselves take for granted, because it's so normal in Japan. So it's
mhm.
yeah,
it's not something that you have to think about. But in other places in the world, like including the Philippines, it's such a big like discussion. Should I let my kid ride a bike, not even to school, but just even in front of the house? Because
Yeah.
our mindset is that it's very dangerous. People don't really care about the safety of others, so on and so forth. And that's the thing that I want to understand, at least for myself, because I really want at some point in the future, I'm hoping that I'm able to sort of like put the stuff, the experience, even the things that we're talking about right now into writing, because I think the final development of the Bike Scouts concept will not be done by me. I think it will be done by younger generations. So all of the things, all of the experiences that I can get in my lifetime, I would like to collect all of that and learn as much as I can and put that into writing, and that includes understanding, learning, and immersing myself in how why the Japanese is so successful in developing their sense of community.
Yes, I think that's a great question and a great, let's say, desire to understand. But to me, as a foreigner here, I think that first of all, it has been like this forever. I mean, like for millennia, because Japan is very prone, like the Philippines, is very prone to natural disasters, and this has been I believe, the way to survive for many communities. So that the community members for them, well, in the big picture, the larger picture, at the end of the day, it's survival. And in order to survive, you have to be supportive of the people around you, and you have to be supported by them. But I'm just a foreigner here, and so my observations are very short, only 22 years. And I can see how it happens at school with my daughter. She goes to the elementary school here, which is just 5 minutes away from our place, and they start from the very beginning there. Of course, every time, and we have talked about this before, but I think that, of course, Hiroko-san and Yuka, they know that too. But in school, so they have school lunches there, and every week there is a pair, or maybe a team of 3 kids who are they are on duty for the week. So they serve the lunches for everybody in the class, and after that, they take care of the dishes and everything. So, and that is, they rotate those duties within, the class members and so on. I believe that's one of the things. Another thing is, of course, that and it's already proverbial, that they clean their own classrooms together, not just one by one. So all together, all of them, they get the mops
Yes.
and the water and everything, and clean the classrooms and so on. And yeah, that starts from a very early age. But there is also another thing. I have heard so many people, well, my friends, mothers, even before the kids go to school, it's like, don't create, what's that, 周りの人たちに迷惑をかけないでね, like, don't disturb the people around you, or don't, what is that, 迷惑, Tim? How do you say this in English?
Inconvenience? I don't know.
Inconvenience, yes. Don't inconvenience.
Inconvenience, yeah.
Yes, inconvenience the people around you. Yes, and there is always
Myles
that.
alluded to as well.
Yes, yes. So I don't know. Maybe somebody, Yuka or Hiroko, maybe you can help us with this.
Yeah,
By the
I
way,
think what you say is a very great point. I'm sorry, Yuka-san.
No.
So
Actually,
that'll be,
I was just going to say I hated it though. I hated those duties when I'm going to school.
well,
And
but
especially, those lunch, like serving time. I said, they always say, "Oh, you gave me little, and she got more." I said, "Okay, I'm trying to be fair." So
in my
anyway,
case, yeah, I was kind of it was atarimae, and I have a lot of friends, U.S. friends, American friends, and they are surprised to know that. So I think a lot of Japanese people are taking for granted this
Yeah.
very nice system or education or the culture. So my coworkers are surprised to know you cannot. In the U.S., when you go to the pick up your kids, you have to be their parents or the siblings, not friend. It has to be your family member, right?
Right.
But then I told my coworkers that story, and they are very surprised. Oh, really? And we just send our kids to school. Have a good day. That's it, and we know that they will be safe. So I think a lot of Japanese people are taking these kind of things for granted, and I I think we should be very appreciative and
Mm.
Yeah.
thanks for this.
Yes, I agree because that's the way. I mean, maybe because people take it for granted and they start from a very early age here, so that eventually becomes the Miles. What the expression you used? Brain muscle, or
Um,
I,
muscle
mus-
memory. Sorry.
muscle memory. Yes,
Yeah.
Muscle
that
memory.
becomes the muscle memory. Yes.
Yeah. No, actually, I wanted to highlight something about um, the school lunches,
Mm-hmm.
because I'd like to believe that it is that practice, no matter how maybe it can be, and I can imagine how it can be unenjoyable when we're young and we need to do something like that. But I think I would like to believe that that leads to sort of like later on in life we end up in companies or we own companies or maybe as an individual we sort of like it's natural for us to think that, oh, let's use our test kitchen in the company so that we can help feed people. It's sort of like a translation of that later on in life. It's the adult version of preparing, serving food to your classmates in your own school. So it becomes bigger, but the habit is already there. The foundation for that kind of action, for that kind of sort of like sense of responsibility for others in your community is already there because of the simple things that happen that we experienced during our childhood.
That's a great point. I love that you connected those two things.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or
Well.
I'm all about looking for the foundational
Yeah.
source of all the
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
things that happen on later in life because we a lot of us and I come again I come from a marketing and advertising background, so we've done a lot of like behavioral stuff to understand how consumers behave. But one thing that I learned is that a lot of times nothing is random. Like the way that we behave, it comes from something. And maybe it happened so long ago in our lives that we no longer remember it, but it always comes from something. And if we can tap into sort of like those things, those foundational things, and use that for us to be able to understand and be able to participate in things that help others, that would be like the best thing ever.
Beautiful.
Yes, indeed. Well, but thank you very much for making that point too, because yeah, we're emotional beings, and as you mentioned earlier, so even though we try to rationalize why we did this or that, it always the rationalizing always comes after the decision has been made, and the
Yeah.
decision is always made because of a certain emotion in that situation, and that emotion is usually based on something on an experience in the past which we probably don't remember. And yes, well, but
Or very subtle things that are not we're not conscious of. I think Malcolm
yes,
Gladwell talked about that in the tipping point. I think it was
hmm,
where
yes,
these little details that you're not even conscious of is what made you buy that house, not the rational breakdown that you thought you had for it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just one more thing about the behavior and cleaning in the schools. I remember a story I read a long time ago. It was an American teacher who came to Japan, was
hmm,
given a tour of a Japanese school, and she said to the teacher afterwards, she marveled because she goes, I went in your bathrooms, they're clean, there's no graffiti. Why is that? And the teacher said, because if there's graffiti, they gotta clean it up. They don't want to clean it up, so they respect it because they're the ones cleaning it. So you see this cleanliness throughout so many
hmm,
situations here, and it's the value on purity and cleanliness is definitely embedded into the culture. So anyway, just a comment.
I
yeah,
love that.
yes, indeed. Well, so I think that it's time for us to wrap up and let everybody go around their day. Miles, thanks very
Thank
much
you so
again
much.
for
I
your
hope you get here soon. And hey, everybody in the audience, hook Miles up, okay?
Yes,
yes,
please. If
yes,
you know anyone or if you're someone who would like to help me set up bike scouts in Japan, we can start very small actually. Just bicycle rides probably.
Are you set up
Please,
to
let's do
take
that.
donations? Are you set up to take donations?
Well, yes, we do, but we like to be very clear about where the money goes. And
Yeah.
right now, actually, there are two things that we're sort of like struggling with, and we're trying to solve. Number one is we're trying to get our resilience workshop series off the ground, because a lot
Mhm.
of people, at least here in the Philippines, talk about resilience, disaster response, so on and so forth. But nobody ever does the work of actually sharing the knowledge, the skills, and the resources with people in communities, so that they can actually help themselves and each other. And so we're trying to do that. We're trying to do like small workshops all over the Philippines, so we can transfer, we can share all of the skills and knowledge that people need. And of course, not we would love to do that for free, but a lot of the things that we need to pay for as well. So
Yeah.
we're looking for funding for that. And then the second one is, and a lot of people sort of like struggle to understand the concept of operational costs, because the bike scouts, we're not really, we don't like to think of ourselves as an NGO. So we, even though we are registered in the Philippines as a nonprofit, we like to think of ourselves more of a platform, because it's friendlier for people. Because here in the Philippines, at least, people have this notion of NGOs being complicated. You know,
Mhm.
it's something that's not for everyone. It's usually top down, and so people are sort of like hesitant when people think of us as that way. So platform is, I think, is friendlier. But again, like stuff like our mobile app, for example, of course, there are costs that we can't get away from, and even the daily engagement activities that we have to do with all of our communities around the Philippines, that costs a lot of money, bicycle parts, so on and so forth. So yeah, if you know anyone or a brand, we prefer to work with brands actually, because we can give value back, and whatever that these that brands and business invest in the work that we do, they can actually make it back. So we feel more comfortable that way. But of course, we do appreciate any kind of help we can get. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Mike, thank
Yes,
you. Sorry, Mike, can I take 1 minute?
please do. Yes.
And so just like for the audience, just in case if anybody is on a foreign immigrant status, because of this recent earthquake, your obligation exempt until April 30th.
Mhm.
So just to, just FYI. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuka, for that. That's a really important information, because some people, yes, we have a lot of foreigners nowadays, and chances are that quite a few of them are actually on um, a visa stay here. So thank you for that. Yes, okay. And Miles, thank you for once again being with us.
Thank you so much.
Just
Appreciate
as
it.
Tim said, I very much hope to have you with us again here, so that we can
Absolutely.
continue the conversation, and hopefully get more people to know about you and the Bike Scouts. And I cannot wait for you to come to Japan too, so that we can meet in
Same.
person
And
eventually.
hopefully in the future we can have a podcast or sitting in a ramen shop or something.
Oh, that, yes,
There you go. Sounds
We'll ride the
yes,
bike together. Okay.
yes.
Yes, absolutely. No, if anyone wants to sponsor, I can do a ride across Japan to promote like bicycle-based resilience. That's
okay.
actually one of the things that I really want to do.
Right, yes, yes.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
keep that in mind.
We'll keep that in mind, indeed. Okay, so thank you very much indeed, and we'll be talking again soon. So have a good day, and okay, we will be here once again on, that's on Sunday, 8:20, with Timothy Langley with the Japanese politics, and next week at 8 o'clock. So when we will be talking about scandal in Japan, another topic which is,
Ooh,
yes.
I love it, Maya. Ooh, I love it. You're right. Cannot wait.
Right. Okay. So thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles.